Star Platinum, like most of the stands from Part 3, are based on each of the numbered cards in a traditional cartomantic tarot card pack, otherwise known as the Major Arcana. It dates all the way back to fortune telling from the 15th century, but most of its divinatory aspects weren't explored until the 18th century. Star Platinum is based on number 17, the Star. This card symbolizes optimism, discernment, and hope. Star Platinum appearance-wise is a mixture of the actual spirit shown on the card, as well as Kenshiro from the manga Fist of the North Star. This is what the Ora Ora stand cry was inspired by. The Kenshiro influence shines through in Jotaro's personality as well, its stand user. Hermit Purple is based on card number 9, the Hermit, also referred to as the Wise Man or the Alchemist, which symbolizes introspection and contemplation. Magician's Red is based on card number 1, the Magician, which symbolizes new beginnings. Its design is based on Enki Bilal's rendition of the Egyptian god Horus from his sci-fi graphic novel series, the Nicopol trilogy. Horus himself was said to be the Egyptian god of the sky and god of kingship as well, elder brother to Anubis and Bastet. Hierophant Green is based on card number 5, the Hierophant, which symbolizes tradition and conformity. The stand's face is directly inspired by the spirit shown on the card. Silver Chariot is based on card number 7, the Chariot, which symbolizes invasion, victory, and overcoming all obstacles. Its design is pretty much the archetypal image of the medieval knight, but one could also say that it is just a recreation of the actual tarot card itself, just without the chariot, funny enough. The Fool is based on card 0, the Fool, and symbolizes innocence and spontaneity. The card does not literally mean fool, but instead one who excels in a certain field. The stand's head is based on masks and dolls from Native American tribes, specifically Katsina figures from the Hopi tribe. Tower of Grey is based on card number 16, the Tower. This card symbolizes chaos and unexpected interruption of journey. The stand's design is directly based on real-life stag beetles. Dark Blue Moon is based on card number 18, the Moon, which symbolizes lies, betrayal, and fear of the unknown. Clearly, its design is Araki's idea of a fishman, but he never states of any specific influences. He does like his horror films, though, so there's every chance he could have been inspired by movies around the time, like Island of the Fishmen, which came out in 1979, or Humanoids from the Deep, which came out in 1980. But again, he's never admitted this. I just kind of Googled aquatic horror movies from the 80s. Strength is based on card number 8, Strength, which symbolizes resilience, compassion, and confidence. In the JoJo Veller, Araki states that its design is based on the ship Mary Celeste, which was found abandoned in the Atlantic Ocean in 1872. But again, Araki likes his horror movies. So it could have also been influenced by the 1980 film Death Ship, which I found, which is about people getting abducted by a Nazi torture ship. Yeah. Ebony Devil is based on card number 15, the Devil. This card symbolizes confusion and misfortune. In its pure form, the stand's design is based on the warrior statue, an Aragic bronze statue from ancient Sardinia. Eventually, though, it possesses a doll and takes the appearance of African shamans from long ago. Yellow Temperance is based on card number 14, Temperance, and this card symbolizes balance and moderation. Its appearance and abilities are based on the 1958 horror film The Blob, which was about this blobby alien thing coming down and eating humans. Hangman is based on card number 12, the Hanged Man, which symbolizes different perspectives. The stand's design is based on the typical mummy. Its ability, though, has been theorized to be influenced by the show Amazing Stories, where in the 19th episode, a horror story was told of someone being haunted by a phantom that they could only see in reflections, much like how Jay Guile uses the stand to fight in the story. Though again, this has never been confirmed by Araki himself. Emperor is based on card number 4, the Emperor, which symbolizes order, control, and ambition. Its design is sort of a combination of a revolver and of an automatic pistol from the era when this was serialized, so like late 80s, early 90s. Empress is based on card number 3, the Empress. This card symbolizes reproduction and the growth of new life in general. Its design is somewhat influenced by the famous Buddha statues of India. Wheel of Fortune is surprisingly not based on the game show which began in 1975 like I thought it was. Instead, it's based on card number 10, Wheel of Fortune. This card symbolizes change and unpredictability. According to Araki, the idea for this stand came from the 1971 film Duel and the 1983 film Christine, where haunted cars come after people. The stand's design is directly based on the Hudson Hornet, a famous race car from the 1950s. All my Cars fans, where you at? It might have also been inspired by ZZ Top's 1983 album Eliminator, which I'm sure Araki has listened to, but he's never credited them specifically. Justice is based on card number 11, Justice, which symbolizes fairness, consequences, and righteous deeds. In an interview from Volume 11 of JoJolion, a special re-release of the first 3 parts of JoJo, Araki explains that the inspiration for this stand came from yet another horror movie. Shocking. He doesn't elaborate, but I did find this one movie from 1980 called The Fog, which was about, a fog psychologically attacking people, which could be an option, but it's never been confirmed once again. Lovers is based on card number 6, the Lovers, which symbolizes conscious connections and bonds. In terms of appearance, it's directly based on the robot Johnny 5, a character from the 1986 movie Short Circuit. Functionally, though, it's based on a fly or a flea, whichever one you prefer. I don't care. I hate them both. Alright, now we talking. One of the best stands in JoJo, objectively. Sun is based on card number 19, the Sun, which symbolizes abundance and happiness. The card also has a lot of references to the Egyptian god Ra, the god of human creation. In ancient Egypt, Ra and the sun were often synonymous with each other. Death 13 is based on card number 13, Death. This card symbolizes self-awareness, transformation, and sometimes even a chance for rebirth. The stand's design is based on the Venetian carnival masks as well as the tarot card itself that Araki designed, especially with regards to this whole Grim Reaper motif. And Death 13 also loves to say the phrase Lolly Ho, which is a reference to a specific sleep spell from the famous Dragon Quest RPG video game series. Judgment is based on card number 20, Judgment. This card symbolizes rebirth and self-reflection. The stand's design is directly based on Kikaider from Android Kikaider and also Kamen Rider, 2 manga series by Shotaro Ishinomori. Its wish-granting ability, though, was inspired by the famous Aladdin and the Magic Lamp story, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. Its catchphrase, Hail to You, takes inspiration from the artist Prince and the way that he was titling his songs around the time. High Priestess is based on card number 2, the High Priestess. This card symbolizes deep thought, intuition, and arcane knowledge. The stand's design is supposed to be an Egu Agba mask from the Igala tribe of ancient Nigeria, wearing a traditional African shaman dress. Geb gets his name from the Egyptian god Geb, son of Shu and Tefnut, known as the god of earth and sometimes the father of snakes. He was often worshipped by Egyptians for allowing their crops to grow. Khnum was inspired by one of the oldest Egyptian deities, Khnum, said to be the god of creation and also god of the source of the Nile River. Quick fun fact, because of the clay that comes from the Nile flooding every once in a while, it was once thought that Khnum would make babies out of clay at a potter's wheel and then place them inside of their mother's womb to be born. Thoth is named after another Egyptian god, the Egyptian equivalent to Hermes, if you will. He was the god of the moon, hieroglyphs, science, magic, judgment, art, writing, and wisdom, with the last 3 in particular directly influencing Boingo's future-predicting manga stand. In its dormant state, Anubis takes the shape of a regular Shamshir sword, a weapon used by Persians and Iranians anywhere between the 9th century all the way up to the 16th century. Once the sword is unsheathed, though, the actual stand appears, which resembles ancient images of the actual Egyptian god Anubis, god of death, mummification, tombs, and of the afterlife. Bastet was the Egyptian goddess of protection. Protection of the home, women's secrets, fertility, all that good stuff. As for its appearance, the stand is based on the typical electrical outlet. But as for its magnetic abilities, it was inspired by Araki writing about Nikola Tesla in one of his other manga, The Lives of Eccentrics, which just really got him interested in electromagnetism. Sethin is based on the Egyptian god Set, god of deserts, storms, violence, disorders, and foreigners. Its appearance is based on a mix of the Nazca lines, geoglyphs found in southern Peru, thought to have been created long ago for ancient deities to see, and of a specific scene from the opening to the 1963 Tetragen 28 Go anime, where a scene of a robot stretches across the sidewalk. I want you to keep this Tetragen 28 Go series in mind as we go along. I think you'll find it to be pretty important to the overall development of stands as a whole. Horus gets his name from the Egyptian god Horus, the same god that Abdal stand references, but in name only, because Horus's head is actually modeled after a pterosaur, an ancient flying reptile, and definitely not a dinosaur. All of the falcon references were instead saved for its stand user pet shop. Osiris was inspired by the Egyptian god Osiris, a god of the afterlife, prosperity, resurrection, and vegetation in ancient Egypt. The showdown between Daniel Darby and Jotaro was itself based on Araki's debut manga, a one-shot for the 1981 Tezuka Awards titled Poker Under Arms. Atum was inspired by the Egyptian god Atum, also one of the oldest deities in Egyptian history, said to be the beginning of all of creation itself, similar in power and stature to the sun god Ra. The actual stand, though, is modeled after a military robot, potentially influenced by Tetragen 28 Go, but it really could have been from any of the sci-fi movies from the 80s. Cyborgs were a really popular thing in media at the time. Tenor sax takes its name from the actual woodwind instrument, the tenor saxophone, which makes sense as its stand user Kenny G has the same name as popular jazz artist Kenny G, which Araki himself was a fan of. Cream's name was not inspired by the Wu-Tang song, which I thought it was for the longest time. Nope, instead it was inspired by 60s British rock band Cream. The stand's design, according to Araki, is supposed to be a combination of the attire worn by French executioners in medieval times, as well as the god of death himself, otherwise known as the Grim Reaper. The World was inspired by the final tarot card, number 21, the World. This card symbolizes the completion of everything, achievement, and a pause in life before the next cycle. Its head specifically is a reference to the shape of the red crown of Egypt, a symbol worn by ancient Egyptian pharaohs to display their connection to the gods long ago, while also expressing their superiority and authority over the regular people living in Egypt. For the pharaohs of ancient Egypt, there were two main crowns that they would often wear. The red crown, symbolizing the pharaohs of Lower Egypt, and the white crown, symbolizing the pharaohs of Upper Egypt. Excluded stands from Part 3 include Holly's stand because, we have no name or ability for it whatsoever. It just manifests. Leech is off of Jotaro's mom, and yeah, that's about it. And also Jonathan's stand because we never get a name for this one either, and everything else we know about it is pretty similar to Hermit Purple anyway. Crazy Diamond's name comes from a 9-part Pink Floyd song composition released in 1975 titled Shine On You, Crazy Diamond. The stand's design was directly inspired by all the hearts on the stand of Tomb from Part 3, which Araki admits in the JoJo Veller led him to designing Josuke's stand. Its head shape resembles a Corinthian helmet worn by warriors in combat in ancient Greece. The hand is a reference to 70s Canadian-American rock band The Band, and its design is somewhat based on a football player's uniform. Echoes gets his name from the progressive rock song Echoes by the band Pink Floyd, which was released in 1971. Araki based the appearance of Echoes on Koichi himself, showcasing his growth throughout the story, beginning as some sort of alien larva in Act 1 and eventually evolving into a fully humanoid stand version of Koichi in Act 3. Heaven's Door takes its name from the song Knockin' on Heaven's Door by Bob Dylan, released in 1973 as part of the soundtrack to the film Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. Its appearance is directly based on the main character from one of Rohan's manga titled Pink Dark Boy. Aqua Necklace's appearance is based on clay figures from the Jomon era of ancient Japan between 14,000 and 300 BCE. They can also be known as Dogu figurines. Its name is based on the 1992 prog rock album Aqua by the band Asia. Bad Company's name is based on the famous hard rock band from the 70s and 80s, Bad Company. Its military-like abilities and, by proxy, I guess, its appearance is based on G.I. Joe action figures. Red Hot Chili Peppers' appearance is a mixture of a couple of things. Araki himself states that he got the idea from the 1988 dinosaur manga Kyoryu Daikiko, and also from Frieza, from Dragon Ball, believe it or not, because of the whole strength despite its size thing. Basically, its design is a Pachycephalosaurus head on Frieza's body. Its name comes from the famous alternative rock band, the Red Hot Chili Peppers. The lock is just a regular padlock if it was a stand, but its name was inspired by a song in 1973 by English rock band The Who titled The Rock. No, not that rock. Surface gets its name from 80s R&B group Surface, and its design is a reference to the copy robots from the 1967 manga Perman, a precursor of sorts to the legendary manga Doraemon. Love Deluxe is a direct reference to the album of the same name by R&B group Sade, released in 1992, the same year that Diamond Is Unbreakable began serialization, funny enough. In line with the character of Tonio, who is a chef, Pearl Jam's design is based on tomatoes and other various cooking vegetables. Its name comes from the 90s grunge rock band Pearl Jam. Achtung Baby gets its name from the 1991 alternative rock album Achtung Baby by the band U2. You remember that time when U2 hacked into everybody's phones just so you could listen to the album? I never listened to that shit. Rat is named after the 80s metal band Rat. The stand's design was influenced by vintage 18th century cannons. Harvest functionally is designed after typical honey worker bees, and its name is based on the 1972 album Harvest by famous country rock singer-songwriter Neil Young. Cinderella's name actually doesn't come from what you think it does. Araki got it from popular 80s and 90s glam metal band Cinderella. However, its function in the story, used by Aya, as a way to beautify a woman is indeed a reference to the fairy godmother from the legendary Cinderella fable, which has been retold for generations. I'm sure you've heard of it. Boy to Man is directly named after the 90s R&B group Boyz II Men. Araki explicitly states that the stand's design was most likely influenced by a manga by Mitsutaro Yokoyama, a manga that we've already brought up before, Tetrujin 28 Go. You picking up on the pattern here yet? I can't believe it took me this long to figure out that most of the stands in JoJo kinda look like robots. Earth, Wind, and Fire comes from, well, exactly what you think it does. The famous R&B and funk group, most popular for their work from the 70s and 80s, Earth, Wind, and Fire. If you remember, woo! In September, woo! Highway Star is based on the hard rock song Highway Star by the English rock band Deep Purple, released in 1972. Its method of splitting itself into a bunch of discs is based on a tabletop game famous in Japan called Daruma Otoshi, where the goal of the game is to knock out sections of the tower with a hammer without the entire thing falling over. Japanese Jenga, if you will. Stray Cat is named after the rock and roll band popular in the 80s, the Stray Cats. And the stand's design is based on a combination of an ordinary houseplant as well as Araki's grandfather's cat named Chaco, who hurt him as a kid, leading him to mistrusting cats as a whole for a long time. Superfly, appearance-wise, is literally just an ordinary electricity transmission tower, but its name comes from the iconic 1972 funk album of the same name by the one and only Curtis Mayfield. Enigma's name comes from 90s German electronic band Enigma, and its process of turning people and things into paper is artistically inspired by the work of Dutch graphic artist MC Escher, most famous for his artwork throughout the mid-20th century. Cheap Trick's ability of latching onto people's backs is based on the Japanese legend of the Obarion, a type of yokai which piggybacks on the humans and becomes unbearably heavy. The stand's name comes from popular 70s and 80s hard rock band Cheap Trick. The most obvious Adam Hartfather reference, right, is Polaroid cameras. The camera tied to the stand as well as the photos it produces are directly inspired by this type of 80s photography aesthetic that's still pretty popular to this day, believe it or not. The stand ability itself, though, Yoshihiro being able to attack and manipulate the world around him through photographs, comes from an old Japanese myth about pictures being able to steal souls and capture ghosts, which comes from the Meiji era of Japan around the late 19th century. Adam Hartfather's name is inspired by the album Adam Hart Mother, released by Pink Floyd in 1970. Sheer Heart Attack's name comes from the Queen album released in 1974, Sheer Heart Attack. It's also a reference to Killer Queen, its source stand, because its face is essentially just a miniature Killer Queen skull on the front. Killer Queen gets his name from the same album as Sheer Heart Attack, only this time is named after a specific song instead. The second song on the album, Killer Queen. Its design is influenced a lot by cats, not just aesthetically, but characteristically as well. It's also one of Araki's favorite stands to draw, quick fun fact. Bites the Dust is named after the famous Queen song that I'm sure you've all probably heard at some point, at least once. Another one bites the dust. The only excluded stand we got here is Mansaku Nijimura's stand, the father of Okuyasu and Keicho. We know that he probably had one at some point, given that he was a follower of Dio. Dio implanted his own cells into him. But yeah, that's about all we know about it. After Dio died, after years of mentally and physically abusing both of his children, Okuyasu's dad pretty much just transformed into a sewage monster. And yeah, it's pretty sad, isn't it? Being the stand to the son of Dio, Gold Experience's design is meant to be some sort of combination of a ladybug and a scarab beetle. In ancient Egypt, jewels of scarab beetles were often seen as symbols of creation. Ladybugs can be seen as symbols of regeneration, and the wings on its shoulders symbolize peace. The stand's name comes from the funk rock album by Prince, The Gold Experience, released in 1995. Sticky Fingers gets his name and design, and pretty much its ability too, from the Rolling Stones album Sticky Fingers, released in 1971, which has a zipper on its cover. Sticky Fingers' stand cry, "Adi Adi Adi," comes from Arrivederci, which means goodbye in Italian. Also, I just want to apologize in advance for my horrible Italian accent. Moody Blues is based on the English prog rock band, the Moody Blues, who were really popular in the 60s and 70s. Its ability is pretty much based on VHS tapes and VCRs from a time before streaming was a thing. You kids don't know! Each bullet in Sex Pistols is essentially anthropomorphic versions of the 9mm bullets they ride on when in battle. They're named after the English punk rock band, the Sex Pistols. Aerosmith's name comes from the legendary hard rock band Aerosmith, and its design is based on monoplane fighter aircrafts from around the 1930s. The design for Purple Haze, in particular its helmet, was inspired by the helmets worn by soldiers in ancient Rome, kinda like Crazy Diamond. Its name comes from the psychedelic hard rock song released in 1967 by the one and only Jimi Hendrix called Purple Haze. Similar to Killer Queen, Spice Girls' design also emulates a lot of cat-like features. The name comes from popular 90s pop girl group, the Spice Girls. If you want to be my lover, you gotta get with my friends. Mr. President is named after the Mr. President Eurodance group, most popular for their fusions of pop, hip-hop, and reggae throughout the 1990s. The design of Black Sabbath is influenced a lot by medieval Italian clothing. Araki stated that it's wearing a Venetian carnival dress akin to something out of Casanova. Its name comes from the heavy metal band once featuring the iconic Ozzy Osbourne, Black Sabbath. Soft Machine is named after the English prog rock band Soft Machine, most popular in the 60s and 70s. Kraftwerk is named after the German electronic and synth pop band Kraftwerk, and the stand's design, at least its head, resembles the structure of an actual human skull. Little Feat's design comes from a cyborg named XB2, a character from Enki Bilal's sci-fi novel La Foire, The Carnival of Immortals, published in 1980. Which is actually about a futuristic dystopian reality set in 2023, which is next year, believe it or not. Still waiting on those flying cars, by the way. The stand's name comes from the 70s rock band Little Feat. Another Part 5 stand influenced by Veneto. I guess it's only right. Man in the Mirror's face is also influenced by Venetian masks. Araki said that the shape of it reminded him of the Tengu mask from Japan, which is why he wanted to incorporate it into his story. Its name and mirror world ability is based on the song Man in the Mirror, released by the one and only Michael Jackson back in 1985. Beach Boys' design is that of a fishing pole. Pretty straightforward. The stand's name comes from the popular 60s rock band The Beach Boys. The Grateful Dead gets its name from the rock band Grateful Dead, most popular throughout the 70s and 80s. Its appearance comes from another Japanese yokai, the Dodo Meki, a female demon cursed with long arms covered in bird eyes. Kimetsu no Yaiba fans might recognize this one. Babyface's laptop form is exactly that, just a cool looking laptop. But its humanoid form, Araki says, is actually supposed to be his idea of an evil version of Echo's Act 3, Koichi Stan. It gets his name, though, from the 80s and 90s R&B singer Babyface. Now, Araki says that he just thought it would be cool to draw someone skating down the street, so that's all the inspiration behind this design really is. But looking at the type of skates and the way in which Gaucho skates, it seems as though Araki might have watched a lot of speed skating in particular when designing this stand. The stand's name is White Album, which is actually a reference within a reference. It's what a lot of people use to refer to the 1968 self-titled album by the Beatles, because the cover is white, you see. Clash is named after 80s punk rock band The Clash, and its appearance is that of a Dunkleosteus, an ancient armored fish from the late Devonian period. Talking Head is named after the 70s and 80s post-punk band Talking Heads, and its appearance is what Araki would describe as a fusion between an octopus and some sort of alien larvae. Notorious B.I.G. is named after legendary 90s rapper, The Notorious B.I.G., also known to others as Biggie Smalls. Metallica's ability to manipulate the iron in a person's bloodstream is functionally based on red blood cells from inside our actual bodies. Its appearance, though, was inspired by the Hattie Fatteners, small, white, ghost-like creatures featured in The Moomins, a series of children's fantasy books released between 1945 and 1993. Its name is the same as the IRL popular metal band, the one and only Metallica. Green Day gets its name from the punk rock band Green Day, most popular in the 90s and 2000s. The mold ability is based on an actual real-life fungus that I can't pronounce, but here it is. You see it on the screen. You try and read the shit. Oasis gets its name from the 90s British rock band Oasis, who were reaching peak popularity levels at the time of Golden Wind's serialization, like mid to late 90s. King Crimson borrows its name from the prog rock band King Crimson, popular throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s. King Crimson also has a sub-stand ability called Epitaph, which grants Doppio/Diavolo with precognition, and this ability is named after the song Epitaph, the third track off of King Crimson's debut album, In the Court of the Crimson King. The idea of having Epitaph as a second face on King Crimson's head was actually inspired by the 1990 film Total Recall, where there's a character, George, which has a mutant little brother growing out of his abdomen named Kuato. In the manga specifically, the void in which Diavolo exists in while erasing time was artistically inspired by the nude descending a staircase paintings from the late 19th and earlier 20th centuries by French painter and sculptor Marcel Duchamp. The ability of rolling stones revealing its victim's death as a carving in the side of the stone comes from an old saying from famous artist Michelangelo that every block of stone already has a statue inside of it that its sculptor merely discovers. Its name, however, comes from the legendary 60s rock band, the one and only Rolling Stones. Excluded stands from Part 5 include sorbet and gelato stands. Unfortunately for them, they never got a chance to use their power. They were being too nosy, to say the least. But we do know that they were stand users because every member of the La Squadra Hitman team did have a stand. And also the natural resources worker stand mentioned by Polnareff was actually one of the first stand users ever. We see that it has some type of shock discharge ability, but it was never clearly defined. It was just kind of used to explain the origin of stands, you know? Stone Free gets his name from the rock song by legendary musician Jimi Hendrix titled Stone Free, which was released in 1966 in the UK and in 1969 in the US. Kiss's name and somewhat its standability was inspired by the iconic 70s metal band Kiss. You know, the band of nothing but a bunch of guys that look like Orochimaru. Burning Down the House is just an ordinary grand piano for the most part. Or is it? But in the background, there is a piece by Roy Lichtenstein hanging on the wall, a famous painter and sculptor most known for leading the pop art movement of the 60s. The stand comes from the new wave song Burning Down the House by the aforementioned band Talking Heads, released in 1983. Foo Fighters, the stand and the person gets their name from the 90s alternative rock band Foo Fighters. Araki has said before that its design is supposed to be something of an insect or a reptile to match its plankton-based stand ability. Like a chameleon, almost. He also describes it as sort of an alternate version of Hierophant Green, Kakyoin's stand from Part 3. Weather Report, the stand and the person gets their name from Weather Report, the jazz band from the 70s and 80s. Its design is basically just clouds, but given Araki's multiple references to mythology in the past, it's easy to see that parts of this design, like the shoulders and the feet in particular, were probably taken from aspects of Greek mythology. Weather Report's more advanced abilities of making it rain frogs and turning humans into snails, Araki says comes from the 1982 movie The Beastmaster, a film about a man who can communicate with animals fighting against an evil wizard. Diver Down gets its name from the 1982 album Diver Down by heavy metal band Van Halen. Its ability to phase through solid objects was somewhat inspired by the swimming abilities of Oasis from Part 5, and its design aesthetically is based on scuba divers. Goo Goo Dolls is named after an alternative rock band from the late 80s, early 90s, the Goo Goo Dolls. Araki says that its design is supposed to be something of a mummified monkey. Araki says that Manhattan Transfer's design is some sort of plant, and that in the story it moves around and operates like a satellite. It gets its name from 70s jazz group the Manhattan Transfer. Highway to Hell gets its name from the 1979 hard rock song and album Highway to Hell by the one and only AC/DC. Marilyn Manson's face is based on a welding mask. If it unlocked the gold skin, I guess. The stand's name comes from popular and also very controversial alternative metal artist Marilyn Manson, most known for his work in the 90s and early 2000s. Jumpin' Jack Flash gets his name and its zero gravity ability somewhat from the hard rock song by the same name, Jumpin' Jack Flash, released by the Rolling Stones in 1968. Araki says that the title, Jumpin' Jack Flash, just really made Araki want to create a stand that could just jump and bounce around all over the place. Limp Bizkit's ability to turn things invisible was inspired by the 2000 sci-fi horror movie Hollow Man, a movie about a scientist going insane after volunteering himself to be a test subject for a special serum that can turn people invisible. Its name comes from nu metal band Limp Bizkit. Give me something to break! All my WWE fans, where you at? Just one more fight and I'll be... The appearance and the way in which Survivor moves in the story, Araki says, reminds him of a jellyfish. The stand's name comes from the 80s rock band Survivor, most known for their iconic workout song from Rocky III, Eye of the Tiger. Planet Waves gets its name from the 1974 rock album Planet Waves by Bob Dylan. Its design is supposed to be a body made up entirely out of muscle fibers with a human heart for its head. Dragon's Dream gets its name from the Dragon's Dream series of art books by artist Roger Dean, most known for his album cover art for bands that Araki has listened to in the past, like Asia and Yes. Yes, the Roundabout guys. Its standability is directly based on the ancient Chinese practice of feng shui, the practice of reading energy and using it to harmonize individuals with their environment as early as 4000 BCE, something that's still being adopted today by some interior designers to get, the aesthetic, the ambiance. Yo-Yo Ma gets its name from legendary Chinese-American cellist Yo-Yo Ma. For the most part, its design was inspired by the forest fairies from Grimm's fairy tales in the 1800s. The famous Grimm's fairy tales, which gave us all the original versions of stories like Hansel and Gretel, Snow White, Cinderella, Red Riding Hood, etc., etc. But the stand's head specifically was actually modeled after a Pickelhaube, a helmet worn by Prussian and German firefighters and police officers during the 19th and 20th centuries. Green Grass of Home's design is supposed to be that of a demonic baby, also with tribal-like influences, similar to a lot of the Egyptian-based stands from Part 3, in particular Iggy's stand, the Fool. Its standability, though, of continuously shrinking someone the closer that they get to its stand user, was inspired by Zeno's paradox of dichotomy, which states that before an object can travel a given distance, it must travel half of that distance. To reach half of that distance, it must travel half of that distance, or a quarter of the overall distance. This ain't math class, so I won't spend too much time on this. I'm already starting to feel like going right now. Basically, any given distance can be infinitely halved, and is labeled a dichotomy because it involves repeatedly splitting the distance into two parts. Jailhouse Lock is named after the song Jailhouse Rock by the one and only Elvis Presley, released back in 1957. Its ability to manipulate memories, Araki says, was inspired by the theme of memories in entertainment media at the time. He never specifies from where exactly, but I did find a movie from 2001 called Memento about a man with amnesia trying to find out who killed his wife, which seems like the type of stuff Araki's into, horror, thriller, mystery type stuff. And it only came out a little over a year into Stone Ocean serialization, so hey, I'm sticking with it. By the very nature of its standability, Bohemian Rhapsody turning fictional characters into reality includes a litany of references to comics, movies, and other fables and fairy tales from the real world, so, we don't need to get into it. We'll be here all day. Some of it is spoilers anyway. It gets its name from the iconic progressive rock song Bohemian Rhapsody by the band Queen, which was released in 1975. Sky High gets its name from the disco song Sky High, released in 1975 by the British band Jigsaw. The stand's main body looks like some sort of insect, but the second miniature head is directly based on the shape of a pteranodon. All my One Piece fans, what's up? Its skyfish-based ability was actually inspired by rods in photography, a visual phenomenon that occurs as a result of motion blur caused by insects. Underworld is named after British electronic group Underworld, most popular for their techno work throughout the 1990s. Underworld also has the Star of Life on its chest, the symbol for emergency medical services used in many countries around the world. I'm pretty sure you've seen this before. Hopefully not because you were the one that needed the emergency medical services. Whitesnake's appearance is based on the attire worn by medieval executioners, similar to Cream, Vanilla Ice's stand from Part 3, just, I guess, with a more kingly-like aesthetic. Its name is the same as the iconic 80s rock band Whitesnake. Sea Moon, an evolved form of Whitesnake, is named after the reggae song Sea Moon, written by Paul and Linda McCartney, and performed by the rock band Wings, released in 1972. Araki says that its appearance kinda reminds him of Darth Maul from the Star Wars franchise. Green Darth Maul. Made in Heaven, the final evolution of Whitesnake, is named after the song and album Made in Heaven, released by Queen in 1995. Its design is supposed to be that of a centaur, a mythical creature with the upper body of a human and the lower body of a horse, only with 2 legs instead of 4. Its ability of time acceleration is actually tied to Albert Einstein's theory of relativity, which, in layman terms, or I guess I should say in charisma terms, pretty much explains the law of gravity and how it relates to other forces of nature, including cosmology, astronomy, everything, basically, everything around us. Why is this man so broken? Excluded stands from Part 6 include Emporio's mother's stand because Poochie stole it and killed her before we could ever see it, and also whatever stand Poochie used against Foo Fighters. It has no name, we only see that it has some sort of boiling-like ability. And I'm pretty sure there's also like hundreds of other stands that Poochie has just stored away, burned onto CDs. But luckily for our main characters, we never really got that deep into Poochie's bag for real. The stand of Johnny Joestar, Tusk, evolves throughout the story much like Koichi's stand echoes from Part 4. Araki says that its appearance in Act 1 sort of resembles an axolotl, an amphibious creature once living in the lakes around Mexico City and are now an endangered species. Protect the axolotls! In Act 4, Araki says the stand reminds him of the MSO5 Zaku 1 suit from the famous Mobile Suit Gundam manga series. Its name comes from the song Tusk, released in 1979 by the rock band Fleetwood Mac. Ballbreaker gets his name from the song and album by AC/DC titled Ballbreaker, released in 1995. The stand's design is based on the actual steel balls themselves, owned by the Zeppeli family. Ticket to Ride is actually Araki's twist on the old saying that a woman's weapon is in her tears. The stand's name comes from the 1965 song by the Beatles, Ticket to Ride. Oh Lonesome Me gets its name from the song released in 1957 by country musician Don Gibson. Its design and rope transferability is based on the typical Cowboys and Lassos aesthetic. I mean, somebody in Steel Ball Run had to do it, right? Scary Monsters is named after the new wave song and album released by the one and only David Bowie in 1980, titled Scary Monsters and Super Creeps. Its ability of turning people into dinosaurs, Araki says, was directly based on the original Jurassic Park film from back in 1993. Wow. First stand in a while to not be named after a song, which kind of makes the name even funnier, to be honest. Cream Starters. Cream Starters' design and ability is based on a simple can of shaving cream. Yep, that's it. In a Silent Way's design comes from Native American wall art and paintings, specifically art of the god Tezcatlipoca, god of the night sky and actually one of the 4 Aztec creator gods. The stand's name comes from the 1969 jazz rock album by the legendary Miles Davis called In a Silent Way. Hey Ya gets his name from the song Hey Ya, released in 2003 by one half of Outkast, legendary hip-hop artist Andre 3000. Tomb of the Boom 1, 2, and 3 all have a design based on anteaters, mammals typically found in the grasslands of South America. The stand is named after another song by a member of Outkast, this time the other half, Big Boy, off of the same double album, Speakerboxxx The Love Below, that Hey Ya is also featured on, this one being the 11th song off of the Speakerboxxx album, in particular, the more underrated album of the two if you ask me, a song called Tomb of the Boom. Boku no Rhythm wo Kitekure, translated to English, means listen to my rhythm, which then translated to Spanish is Oye como va mi ritmo. Not only the name of its stand user, Oye como va, but is also a reference to the song Oye como va, performed by Latin rock band Santana back in 1971. The stand's face resembles that of a shoebill stork, typically found in East Africa, and the rest of its design, Araki says, was inspired by other various pieces of native African artwork. and it's never been confirmed, but its ability of turning anything into a bomb simply by touching it might have also been inspired by Killer Queen from Part 4. It's literally the same ability. Wire's design is that of your ordinary winch with a pair of two hooked cables, which is, I guess, appropriate for its dimensional fishing-like ability. The name is borrowed from the jazz and funk album Wired by Jeff Beck, released in 1976. Mandem's appearance was inspired by the Major League Training brace used in the sports manga Star of the Giants, a baseball manga written by Iki Kajiwara, serialized in Weekly Shonen Magazine from 1966 to 1971. The name Mandem comes from a song released in 1976 by Jerry Wallace, Mandem, Lovers of the World, which was also used for a commercial advertising Mandem, a Japanese company for male grooming products. Catch the Rainbow's face is a hockey mask, kinda like Jason Voorhees. I would be shocked if Araki hasn't seen Friday the 13th. The stand's name, as well as its ability to walk on rain, was inspired by the 1975 song Catch the Rainbow by the heavy metal band Rainbow. Sugar Mountain is a stand that tests Johnny's and Gyro's honesty and greed. This ability is in reference to one of Aesop's fables, the Golden Axe, also known as the Honest Woodcutter, which is about the Greek god Hermes diving into a river to reclaim a man's lost axe and being amazed at his honesty of only accepting the original axe, despite being met with a gold one and a silver one first. The stand's name comes from the 1977 folk rock song Sugar Mountain by singer-songwriter Neil Young. Araki believes the inspiration for this stand to be some sort of tribal tattoo that he saw somewhere. Its name is a reference to the 1981 album Tattoo You by the Rolling Stones. In Araki's own words from the JoJo Veller, just as it seems, the idea for this stand came from balloon art. Pretty straightforward. The name Tubular Bells, though, comes from the prog rock album Tubular Bells, released in 1973 by Mike Oldfield. 20th Century Boy gets his name from the song 20th Century Boy, released in 1973 by the rock and roll band T-Rex. Civil War is named after the song Civil War by popular 80s and 90s hard rock band Guns N' Roses. When Chocolate Disco's stand ability is in effect, the coordinate grid that it projects onto the ground was inspired by the classic strategy board game Battleship, which first appeared actually as a pen and paper game as early as the 1930s. The stand's physical appearance is as a vambrace worn by Disco, the stand user. These were the forearm guards used by soldiers in medieval Europe as part of their suits of armor. The stand is named after the popular Valentine's Day song in Japan, Chocolate Disco, a song released by J-pop girl group Perfume back in 2007. A song that Araki just had to include in his story some way because of his daughter at the time playing the song 24/7 in the background while he was busy listening to AC/DC, Prince, all the dope shit that Araki's into. Shout out to Chocolate Disco though, even though it's for kids, it's actually not that bad of a song. Araki says that he wanted the appearance of Dirty D's Done Dirt Cheap to be something akin to the stitching found in baseballs. The stand's name comes from the 1976 song and album Dirty D's Done Dirt Cheap by the legendary hard rock band, I've mentioned them a million times already, AC/DC. Araki loves some AC/DC. Getting into a little bit of Dirty D's ability to travel between dimensions though, If two versions of the same thing or person get within close proximity of each other, they will crumble and explode, causing a reaction similar in appearance to Menger sponges in our real world. A fractal object with an infinite number of cavities after subdividing a cube multiple times. D4C Love Train, the evolved form of Dirty D's done dirt cheap, gets its name from the song Love Train, released in 1972 by popular 70s and 80s R&B group, the OJs. Man, my mom would pop for this one. Excluded stands from part 7 includes the world because, and this is actually the first time I'm bringing this up, literally every other part after Stardust Crusaders, the world is there. It's always there. Dio is inevitable. Alternate Universe Johnnies and Alternate Universe Hot Pants stands because, honestly, they just seem to be exact replicas of Tusk and Cream Starter. And finally, the Emerald Prospector stand because we know nothing about it. It was just mentioned real quick in a flashback. All we know is that it works similar to Tomb of the Boom. Soft and Wet gets his name from the song Soft and Wet by the iconic Prince in 1978. Fun fact, it was actually Prince's first single ever as a solo act, released on his 20th birthday. The stand's appearance was designed solely to match Josuke's sailor attire, and its bubble-based ability is actually a wider reference to the history of bubbles in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure as a whole, dating all the way back to Caesar's Hamon technique from Part 2. Paisley Park's aesthetic was inspired by the common GPS maps that everyone sees whenever they're using their phones for directions. Its name comes from the song Paisley Park, another one by Prince. This one being released in 1985 as part of his 7th studio album, Around the World in a Day. Doggy Style is definitely not a reference to what you might be thinking it is. You horn nuggets. Instead, it's a reference to the rap album Doggy Style, the debut album for the one and only Snoop Dogg, or Snoop Doggy Dogg as he was called at the time, back in 1993 when this was released. California King Bed is named after the Rihanna song California King Bed, released in 2010. This also might have been another stand included on behalf of Araki's daughter, because I don't know, Araki listening to Rihanna? Crazier things have happened, I guess. The stand's appearance had to have been inspired by the work of legendary Japanese artist Takashi Murakami. The flowery aesthetic and the design of the smiley face leads me to believe that it might have been inspired by his smiling flower art in particular. I'm pretty sure you've seen this before. I think I've seen this before. Why do I remember this? Nut King Cole is honestly just a pun on the name of the legendary jazz and R&B musician, Nat King Cole. Walking Heart has no references that I can really confirm. I've seen some theories on Reddit suggesting that it might be a reference to the song Walking Heart Attack by Holland K. Smith, or I'm Gonna Let My Heart Do the Walking by the Supremes. Only thing I can say for sure, and this is honestly a great time to bring this up, Walking Heart continues the running theme of the word king, appearing in the names of the stands for each of the Higashikata family members. Speed King gets his name from the alternative song Speed King, released by the band Deep Purple in 1970. Joe Bean is also one of my favorite JoJo characters, in case you ever wanted to know. The 3 leaves part of Awakening 3 Leaves is a direct reference to the club's suit of cards and a standard card deck. It's actually a pun on the stand user's name, Mitsuba, which is just Japanese for 3 leaves. Though it hasn't been confirmed by Araki, many believe it to be named after the song Awakening by heavy metal band Judas Priest, released in 2008. Paper Moon King's appearance and standability is directly based on origami, the art of paper folding which has existed throughout Japan for thousands of years. Its name comes from a song called It's Only a Paper Moon, originally from 1933, with music by Harold Arlen and lyrics by Yip Harburg and Billy Rose, which has been re-released so many times over the years by other notable musicians like the aforementioned Nat King Cole, Ella Fitzgerald, and even Frank Sinatra. King Nothing's aesthetic is that of a medieval court jester, and is named after the heavy metal song King Nothing, released by Metallica in 1997. Space Trucking is named after the 1972 song Space Truckin' by the hard rock band Deep Purple. While dormant, it takes the appearance of a literal deck of cards, but once fully manifested, it then integrates that aesthetic into its overall design. I personally would like to believe that this was inspired by Alice in Wonderland, but that's just because I really like Alice in Wonderland. Born This Way is named after the Lady Gaga song Born This Way, released in 2011. It's also just a really cool motorcycle dude. Fun, Araki says, has the head of a lemon juicer and the body of a stethoscope. It gets its name from the 1964 song Fun by 60s and 70s surf rock band, we've mentioned them before, the Beach Boys. Le Feuille, that's the best you're gonna get from me. This stand gets its name from the Autumn Leaves Jazz Standard, composed by Joseph Cosma in 1945. It's called a jazz standard because over the years since this has been created, a lot of other jazz musicians have borrowed or sampled from this composition in one way or another when making their own song arrangements. Autumn Leaves is just the English translation of the original French title that you won't get me to say again. Nope, not doing it. I Am a Rock is named after the song I Am a Rock, released by 1965 by legendary folk rock duo Simon and Garfunkel. Doobie Wah gets its name from the Peter Frampton song Doobie Wah, released back in 1976. I hated this stand when I was reading JoJolion. Love Deluxe's main reference is the same as Love Deluxe from Part 4, Yukiko Stan. The Sade album. Great music. But now, the only reason why I brought this up, it's pretty much the same stand as Yukiko's Love Deluxe. Instead of fighting with the actual hair itself, the stand just kind of makes hair grow out of any and all random places. It's kind of weird, not gonna lie. But yo, the stand's design here. First, the afro, you gotta love it. Bro, Araki. I mean, this stand is pretty much inspired by all my black queens from the 70s, man. Just look at it, just Like, I know it's not human, but this stand about to make me act up. I ain't even gonna lie. Both Shot Key number 1 and Shot Key number 2 are named after the song Shot Key 7th Path, released by British electronic artist Aphex Twin in 1992. There aren't any specific references here. One stand is just a Rocky stump for a hand, and the other is just a gas alien in a football. But if you ask me, Shot Key number 2 specifically really looks like the legendary Pokemon Mesprit. Maybe it's just me. Vitamin C actually has a symbol on its face resembling the logo for Lucky Land Studio, Araki's company focused only on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure content. Its head also seems influenced by medieval court jesters, similar to King Nothing, you know? But the stand is named after the song Vitamin C, released by the experimental funk and rock band Can in 1972. The money that Milagro Man produces, even down to the serial number, are completely identical to actual yen bills used in Japan. There are theories of Milagro Man being named after the song Milagro by Santana, Miracle Man by Elvis Costello, Miracle Man by Ozzy Osbourne even, but it's never been confirmed. This is the most recent part, so as you can see, there are a lot of unconfirmed Stan references here. Blue Hawaii gets its name from the 1961 album Blue Hawaii by Elvis Presley, which was the soundtrack actually to the movie of the same name. But it might have also been a carryover from Part 7 as well, because it was also the name of a boat that Funny Valentine used to get around in Steel Ball Run. That's my president! Brainstorm's appearance is that of a bunch of miniature Burr puzzles. An interlocking puzzle, the best way I can describe it is that it's kind of similar to a Rubik's Cube. They've been around since the 1600s. The stand's name comes from the song Brainstorm, released in 1972 by indie band Hawkwind. In its dormant state, Ozone Baby takes the form of the LEGO Architecture White House 21006, one of the most popular LEGO architecture sets, which has since been discontinued, unfortunately. And the stand's name comes from the 1982 Led Zeppelin song Ozone Baby. Dr. Wu gets his name from the song Dr. Wu, released in 1975 by American rock band Steely Dan. Wonder of You is named after the Elvis Presley compilation album The Wonder of You, released back in 2016. Wonder of You's aesthetic, an older-looking person with a cane and a bowler hat looming over its victim, was inspired by the 1953 painting titled Golconda, an oil painting by Belgian surrealist artist René Magritte. Excluded stands from Part 8 includes Killer Queen, because just like Love Love Deluxe, it's pretty much just an alternate version of the Killer Queen from Part 4, except this one is like literally just the same Killer Queen. Holly stand because we know absolutely nothing about it. If any, I don't even know if Holly really has a stand, but the way that she talks about Yasuho's stand, I think she has a stand. And finally, Joseph Joestar's stand, because I mean, it honestly just looks like a humanoid version of Hermit Purple, but we still don't have a name or anything like that. It was just kind of introduced to us in a flashback and then the story just ended. But hey, maybe we find out more about it in JoJo lands.
If it's me, I apologize. I'm just high, so sometimes I'll just emphasize. I'm just shy, so I really need to emphasize. After this performance, check my vitals, make sure that I'm still alive.